Welcome, Wargamers. Doug here from 2 Plus Tough, and 3rd edition Age of Sigmar is upon us. And while there's a lot of discussion about match play rules and the core mechanics changing, because they did change quite a bit, really with this channel and my personal focus, I wanted to talk about the thing that gets me most excited for this edition, and that is, of course, Path to Glory. A while back, I did a video about what I thought Path to Glory needed to be. It needed to be a long-form storytelling device that allows you to take a small collection of models, build it up into an entire army with regular supplements and a bit of attention to it. And so with the narrative play section in the core book, which we're going to be exploring today, this is essentially, just to kind of put it in a real brief chunk, it's a campaign system where it doesn't really matter who you're playing against. You keep track of all your progress and that kind of stuff. It allows you to level up heroes, units. You can take casualties that don't come back. You build a roster and your units, they get scars and that kind of stuff. And all the while you're building up a stronghold and capturing territory. And within that framework, there are mechanisms to kind of make sure there's no runaway victor, which is a really important thing that I'm gonna kind of point out as we go, how the system gives you full room to explore, and no matter where you're at with it, if you're a player who can play tons of games, you can go hog wild, but when you play against someone who doesn't have enough time to play a ton of games, your forces will actually be pretty well matched. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is a great step, and it's light years better than what we had before. This system does use points, so there is a balancing factor to it, which quite frankly, I really love. We're going to talk about the way that you build your list, and the way that I'm going to split this kind of coverage up is in this video, I'm going to give an overview of how Path to Glory works, and in my next video, I'm going to actually take the worksheets from the back of the book and start my Path to Glory army on camera, just to kind of help you work through the initial paperwork of getting everything set up. Because once you have everything written down, it's actually very simple. So with that said, let's dive into the core book and its coverage of Path to Glory. So here we are at the narrative play section, and as you can see, they actually broke it down into, they have 5 simple steps here, and to be honest, I'm going to kind of jump around these steps just a little bit because it makes it, quite frankly, more digestible when you see the fuller picture and you kind of reorganize things just a tad. If you've played Warcry, the campaign version from the Tome of Champions, that kind of thing, this will seem familiar to you. The same thing with Crusade and 40k, although to be honest, battle tomes work a little bit different than codexes. Now, the first thing your gaming group does is choose a starting size for your Path to Glory campaign. You can start as low as 600 points, which is perfect because that's a start collecting box typically with 1 extra unit. Or for veteran players, play groups I should say, you can start all the way up at 2k. Now that starting size of game is going to determine a lot. How many units you can have in your roster, called an order of battle, how many starting territories you have, which we'll talk about here in a second, and how many glory points you start with. And glory points, for the purposes of kind of just making this clear, this is your currency that you'll use for upgrades, healings, buying new units, and so on. Now, something I want to make very clear here is that this is the starting size. So if, for example, you are a gamer who goes out and plays a bunch of games, you accrue a lot of glory points, you buy a bunch more units, as long as you don't exceed what the starting, level is, as far as the number of units you can take, you can play bigger point games. There's nothing restricting you to it. It's just you and your opponent have to agree on what size of game you're playing. You start at 600 and you get to build your list with 600 points, but if in the course of like the next couple of weeks, you guys both earn or accrue enough glory points to add more units that you can play 1,000, yeah, you could do that, provided that you have enough, unit spaces and that stuff available. We'll get to it. The point I'm trying to make is don't think of this as like a ceiling, right? This is the starting level and you can go bigger, but this is where everybody started. So once that's established, your starting game size, you're going to choose your starting territories and your order of battle, which are 2 things that kind of happen simultaneously, if I'm honest. They have them in different sections, step 2 and step 3, but truth be told, they're kind of integral to one another. You see, in Path to Glory, for your starting army, no matter what size of game you are playing, you have this order of battle limit. Total units are dictated by the starting size of the game, but within that, you have a maximum of 3 hero units, 1 monster, 1 war machine, 1 wizard, 1 priest, and 1 reinforced unit, and 1 allied unit. Okay, so this is like a nice little framework to kind of channel you down a very specific path. Now, keep in mind, if you were to do, say, Chaos Sorcerer Lord on Mana Core, he would count as a hero, a monster, and a wizard. So kind of keep that in mind when you're choosing your initial thing, how restrictive you want to be with your choices. But the reason I bring that up, the order of battle limits, is because when you choose your starting territory, which is right here, you can actually modify your restrictions. So how does this work? Like, let's say we want to start our campaign for our local store at the warband level, which is 1,000-point games. I think that's a perfect one. You get one starting territory. Look at this little sheet here, pick a territory, and you'll look on the right side here, it has their effects. Increase your hero limit by 1, increase your monster limit, war machine, wizards, priest, everything gets increased by 1. So this is their way of being like, okay, listen, maybe you bought a starter box and one model that it doesn't quite fit necessarily, maybe it exceeds a limit or whatever. Pick a starting territory that gives you access to it, and you're good to go. Now, a fun thing to note is that if you start at the Brigade, which is 1,500 points, or Legion, which is 2,000 point levels, you get access to 2 and 3 territories respectively. So they do let you start with a lot of wiggle room to be able to include various types of things. If you are, for example, a Flesh Eater Quartz player and you just love the lore of Gristlegore, you're going to want a bunch of monsters, so increasing the number of monsters you can take is a fantastic way to get some value out of that. The idea here is there's a little bit of a framework so that everyone can roughly start at the same place, but you do get, a little bit of choice here in the beginning, and these will carry on forward. You'll have more ways to modify your order of battle in the future. Again, this is just to start. For me personally, I know, as we'll cover in my next video, that I want to have like a Cities of Sigmar and Stormcast mixed army. So I might pick the Wild Lands? No. Ancient Roads, there we go. Increase the allied units limit by 1. Gotta get my Cities of Sigmar dudes in there. Now, this brings us to your order of battle, which I'll throw up on the screen here. This is essentially a unit roster and inventory for your campaign. It is not an army list, but a collection of units that you can build your list from. They have to be all part of your faction or allies, but you have to mind the ally limit based on whatever territories and stuff like that you have. So in the course of a campaign, you can definitely have way more points in your roster than you could possibly field in a game. As we said earlier, the starting size of your campaign will dictate how many units can be on your roster, but that can change as you gain glory and conquer different territories and have all different types of achievements. As I said, I'm going to be going through in detail how to fill out your order of battle to start with, so stay tuned for next video for that. The next section we're going to cover is picking your warlord. Now, you pick your warlord first, and then all your other units, not exceeding any allowances or your point limit. Basically, if you start at let's say a 1,000 point level, you get a free 1,000 points, build your roster, there you go. Now I'm going to, like I said before, skip ahead with the unit selection and the warlord. Part of that is this idea of core enhancements. That's just giving artifacts and command traits. It's just part of the list building. We're going to fast forward through that and go to the pick a quest thing, because this is really the meat of how the campaign works. So essentially the way these work is you pick a quest, you look at what the requirements are to achieve it, and then if you do, you get the reward that it lists. So let's pick an example here. Down here, defend your realm. At the end of each Path to Glory battle, add 1 quest point to the progress section of your quest log, which is part of your order of battle thing, for each friendly unit wholly within your territory. In addition, at the end of each Path to Glory battle, you can spend 1 glory point to gain 1 additional quest point. Once you have gained 3 or more quest points, you complete this quest. When you complete it, you gain 10 glory points. Now that one doesn't sound, super sexy. I picked a very basic one, but that's the kind of thing that you're going to start earning glory points very, very rapidly. Now, the other kind of rewards you can get is choosing an artifact from your battle tome, choosing a unique spell for your wizards, a battalion. You can just kind of level up your warband over time to build a really cool army. And if you didn't pick up on it from this, essentially there's 2 things you're tracking at all times. Glory points, which we'll talk about how to earn those throughout the campaigns that you're playing, and then quest points. And quest points are just like, did you do a thing? Yep, okay, then boom, you got enough to achieve this. One thing I cannot stress enough is how important the side margins are in this section, because they make numerous references to supplemental material that's going to come out in the future to support this narrative play. So in the core book, you get 8 quests, okay? And they're great. And many of them you would want to do multiple times if you want to access all the junk inside your army's inventory, like the spells and the command abilities and artifacts and stuff like that. But what we've seen from 40K is that they are willing to put out small little supplements that give you a unique battlefield, narrative rules, as well as, I'm assuming, based on this, quests, artifacts, that kind of thing. So you're taking these endeavors throughout the realms as they give you a war zone in narrative format and building upon your story of your army from there. So I wanted to point that out. There's numerous references to supplemental material to add and build upon this foundation. So now that we have an order of battle, meaning our army is all set, and a quest for them to go on, we're ready to start fighting. And to be honest, these first 2 pages of setting up a battle, I'm going to kind of breeze over because, quite frankly, this is about making sure, A, there's no runaway victor, and B, you can play your Path to Glory games against people who are not playing a Path to Glory campaign. All this does over here is limit how many bonus command traits, artifacts, and that kind of stuff you can take. Not the stuff you started with. You can keep that in your army. This is just extra stuff you've earned throughout your completing various quests. But it's here to keep runaway campaign victors from happening. So a guy who completes, 8 quests can't curb stomp a new player right out of the gate. They're not bringing all of their quest rewards to bear down on them. On the right side here, there's also rules on how to gain glory points for when you're not playing against a Path to Glory army. And yes, you can take your narrative thing to a competitive event, and it just modifies a few things as far as how you attain glory and the consequences after battle, that kind of thing. And lastly here is the Aftermath sequence, which I was so excited to hear about because this to me is the heart and soul of any good campaign system. It's about consequences, right? Things die, units advance, all that kind of stuff. I love it. And I'm going to kind of go through these pretty quickly because really, if you want to play Path to Glory, someone needs to have this book and just kind of work through it. It'll take about 5 minutes, 5 to 10 max, to work through the Aftermath sequence of any narrative game. And you're going to want the book here to do that. So I'm just going to kind of breeze through it so you can get the details yourself. But here's essentially how it goes. First thing you do, earn glory points. This is your campaign currency, and it's about to become real important if you haven't caught the drift here. You get a bunch just for showing up, like we talked about when you start your campaign, when you pick the starting size, they give you free glory points. You get some just for participating in a battle. You know what I mean? Like that should always be the highest or the most valuable thing there is, and it certainly is reflected in the points. But of course there's other stuff, did you win it? Did you win a major victory, minor victory, and was your warlord in the battle and not slain? Keep in mind that just like Warcry, these might get tweaked in the future with various, General's Handbook supplements or narrative supplements, however it is. Just kind of keep that in mind if it looks a little bit wonky. Next thing you're going to do is resolve injuries and casualties. Now this is a great one. There's a chart for heroes and a chart for literally everybody else. Okay, the hero one is simple. You're going to roll 2d6 and apply whatever result happens. On a 2 to 3, your hero is dead, which I freaking love. And in this, yes, your warlord can die on their path to glory. And there's all kind of rules to kind of dictate, walk you through what happens if that goes down. But the fact is, on a 2 through 3 on a 2d6, your dude can absolutely get punked, which I love. As far as units go, that is actually more interesting to me. You see, for units, you have something called a casualty score. To put it very, very simply, for every model in a unit that died during the battle, you're going to roll a die. Every time you roll a 1, it adds a casualty point. The next time you play a game with that unit, you set them up and then remove 1 model for each casualty point the unit has. Now don't worry, there's ways to heal your units up and let them rest and recover and add new dudes to it. But this is how they kind of like brutalize you for letting your dudes just die. So if you have a unit of 20 clan rats, we'll say, 10 of them die during the game, you're going to roll 10 dice at this point in the Aftermath sequence, And if you roll, say, 2 1s, the next time that unit goes on the table, it's going to have 18 dudes instead of 20 because you rolled a casualty score of 2. The next step is gaining renown points. This is essentially your experience point system for units. And there are 4 ranks for units as they rank up, and they gain veteran abilities for use in battle. Now, here is basically your little chart telling you how many renown points you have to earn your veteran rank, but then next to it is how many veteran abilities you get. So we flip the page, and here are the veteran abilities. Note that at max rank, a unit can have 3 veteran abilities, and they're great things. They're all once per battle, but they're just fantastic buffs that allow these units to act more and more independently and effectively. So really good stuff there. Heroes and renown, their work's a little bit different. Instead of getting veteran abilities, if a hero that is not your warlord reaches a renown level of 15 or more, they actually get their own like command ability and command traits and that kind of stuff. Again, if you're playing someone who is earlier on in the campaign, you're going to still be limited to having 1 hero with the command trait and that kind of stuff. But if you're playing a bigger battle towards the end, you're going to be throwing 3 to 4 heroes that can all have really crazy awesome abilities at your opponent. Step 4 is just check to see if you've completed any quests. Now, again, this is the aftermath sequence after a game. If you have, met all the requirements for quest points that you need for your quest to be finished, you get the reward at this point in your aftermath sequence. This is also the part where you can give up on quests. If you want to refocus on something else, you can absolutely do that. You just lose all the progress that you've made before. Now, steps 5 and 6 are very interesting. These are managing your stronghold and territories. And I'll go through the rules and just kind of sum it up really, really quickly. So you start Path to Glory with a stronghold, which lets you have a maximum of 3 territories and 3 barracks. I'll explain all that in a second. And the idea is if you bank enough glory points, you can upgrade your stronghold to an imposing stronghold or a mighty stronghold, which lets you have more territories and more barracks. So thematically, it's like your Path to Glory battle starts with you claiming 1 territory, and then you try to grow your army with more renown and claim more and more territories around you. And territories allow you to change the limits on your army list, as well as many other things that are going to be super cool here in a second when I go through them. So the territory stuff, we already covered when we first started building our list, but what do barracks do? Well, for 5 glory points, you can spend those on a territory that you control, and if you do, you increase the maximum number of units on your order of battle by 2. So if we remember, when we started our 1,000 point game, I believe you could only have a maximum of 8 unit entries on your order of battle. This is how you would bump that number up, and it goes all the way up until 30. Now, one thing that's very interesting here is they also leave a bit of design space with a thing called outposts. Outposts do not show up in this section at all. That is going to be completely in battle packs that come out in the future, right? So you can find rules for establishing outposts in the range of supplemental Path to Glory battle packs available for Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So we know stuff's coming, and that's going to add a new level of, tweaking what your territory is like. And this is probably the most in the weeds section of this entire thing, where you're claiming territories, and this is how you can manipulate your army roster and how many units you can fill it with, as well as have expensive things to dump, your glory points in. This way, there's just always something to spend points on. So even if you have what would normally be a runaway victor, they still have very expensive things to buy. And so it kind of helps keep things in line just a little bit. It slows progress. How about that? Or at least slows progress for those higher level players. Now, the next step is territories. Now, we've already kind of covered this a little bit. The starting territories let you change specifically your limits on your list and that kind of thing. The next page I'm going to go through here is a whole bunch of different kinds of territories. You're going to roll a d66 to see which one you get after every game. You can never have more than 3 of a single type of territory, and this is the step where if you wanted to upgrade it with a barracks or whatever, you can do that, as well as each territory has an upgraded variant. So let's go through this. And so let's dive into these here. These are essentially more ways for you to constantly be manipulating your list. So let's pick Wildlands. Again, it's just like the starter one. Increase your monster limit by 1. Or if you want, you can upgrade this for 10 glory points, increase the limit by 3 instead of 1. So if you are, again, our Gristlegore player, this would be a fantastic one that you would want to upgrade. These starting initial ones here on the left-hand side are pretty much just upgraded / better versions of the starting territories. They're just giving, players more room to develop their orders of battle. On the right side is where things get kind of crazy, where you have stuff like modify your aftermath sequence. So it could be things like buying new units cheaper or healing units better between battles, increasing the amount of glory points that you get per game, which again, this can all snowball and that kind of thing. They also each have an upgrade section where you can spend glory points to upgrade each settlement. And they basically do the exact same thing, but just better. So for example, you receive D3 additional glory points in step 1 of the aftermath sequence for Realmstone Reserve. You can upgrade that to now you get an additional D6 instead of D3. So it's the same concept, it just gets better. What is interesting to note, though, is that future battle tomes will include a Path to Glory section that matters significantly, because if you look at 61 and 66, if your battle tome has faction terrains table, you can roll your corresponding, basically armies are going to have their own specific territory bonuses. Alternatively, you can pick any one of the things from the left-hand side. So good bonuses, and when you are going to have upwards of 3 to 4 territories, depending on how big your stronghold is and what your limit is, upgrading them and that kind of stuff. Again, there's a lot of things to spend glory points on, and they let you manage your roster in new and interesting ways. So you really can, you're going to start very simply, but you can very quickly craft whatever kind of narrative army you want. Now the next step here is 7, which is manage your order of battle. And this is where the real crunch of a campaign comes, because we have units that are now injured because they've lost people to casualties. We have people who are now renowned enough to get veteran abilities. So how can we control those and add flavor and life to them, and also add new units to our order of battle? Well, that's all covered in this section. First up, adding a new unit. There's a little table right down here at the bottom where essentially if you want to buy a unit, you have to spend a number of glory points relative to its point cost, its actual literal point cost, as balanced by the core book or General's Handbook or your battle tome, whatever, has the most recent information. So for example, if you had a 200 point unit you wanted to add, you'd look at this chart and you'd see, okay, 200 right here, and you go over, if you're going to add a unit, it's going to cost you 5 glory points. The next thing we can do is recuperate our units. This is the thing I mentioned before, where as units take casualties, there are ways to heal them and add models back to the unit and change its casualty score. So essentially what you'll do is spend the points on recuperating a unit. Let's go with our 200 point example again. For a 200 point unit, to recuperate them would cost 3 glory points. The way that works is you're going to roll a number of dice equal to its casualty score, how many dudes are dead in that unit, and then for each 4-up, you reduce the casualty score, meaning you get a guy back. The asterisk next to that is that if the unit that you are trying to recuperate did not participate in the last battle, meaning they sat out, they were on your order of battle, but they didn't participate, it's on a 2-up instead of a 4-up. So it's very reliable. If you just let them sit out for one game, that they will recuperate and come right back. And your last option is to reinforce units, which, as we know with the current edition, just means you double the number of models in the unit. So if you have your 20-man Skaven clan rats, boom, you bump it up to 40. And of course, Battle Line is a type of unit that can be reinforced twice. So same thing, our 200 point unit, we're going to follow this chart over to reinforce. It would cost 6 glory points to do that. But remember, reinforcing it does mean the points increase. So as you reinforce units, you will get more and more expensive to recuperate them and reinforce them further. Lastly, if there's any units that are just decimated, right? Like if you've got your 20-man unit of clan rats and they have like a casualty score of 19 or something like that, or they're completely wiped out. Retiring units just means that you can take them off your order of battle roster. It doesn't cost you anything. You just can't transfer, veteran abilities or anything like that. So it's time for some honest thoughts about the system. It is a little bit bare bones. However, we do know that there is a lot of supplemental material coming in the future that's going to add things, and that's from your personal battle tome for your army, as well as most likely going to be like supplemental, like small books that have specific campaigns, war zones, that kind of thing. Frankly, I'm in love with it because it allows you to start very small. 600 points is the minimum that you need, which is, like I said, a starter box, maybe an extra unit depending on the starter box. And it gives you a lot of ways to craft a narrative around a specific hero. I do think that adding more quests to this system is going to be of vital significance, but even in the 8 that you have, they are stories about your hero going out and conquering over time to achieve certain things, to unlock options. You complete a quest and you have a real tangible thing that your army can now use, whether it's a new artifact, spell, something like that. One of the things I like is that Tiers of Battle section that I breezed over it because that's something you and your group really need to address, on a game-to-game basis. But essentially, it always favors the weakest player, right? So like if someone is brand new to the system, the guy who's, finished 15 quests won't get access to all of his shenanigans and that kind of stuff because he's playing someone who doesn't have that many options. And yes, the argument can be made, well, if I worked hard to accrue all these things, shouldn't I be able to take them? But the counter to that is, well, you can still take them, you just can't take them all. There's just a limit on how many you can take, but you can choose whichever ones you want. And in addition to that, it just helps newer players get into the Path to Glory format without being curb stomped like a baby seal. But if you and your opponent are both, kind of even relatively on the same tier as far as how many glory points you've earned, how you've upgraded your strongholds and that kind of stuff, truth be told, you can have some titanically massive battles. Tons of units, tons of points, you have command traits everywhere, spells being cast by all different kinds of wizards, it's just nuts. I think that the glory point system and the little economy they've created is quite good. We saw this with Warcry and their campaign system, specifically when it came to the Tome of Champions, where you have some really tough choices to make with the resources at your disposal. You can do stuff like upgrade a territory, upgrade your stronghold, which allows you to have more territories and upgrade them further. You can also heal units, buy new ones, reinforce them. It's all the same pool of resources that you have to make hard decisions on how you distribute across your army. Hard decisions make excellent campaigns. I'd love to see some kind of like supplemental thing, maybe in one of the books or even a General's Handbook, that gives you a great way to like help people get caught up. So like, let's say you and your core group are all progressing, kind of at the same rate relatively, and then a brand new person comes in and they're kind of struggling to get caught up. Maybe there's a way like to give them a certain number of glory points to help them boost themselves up, something like that. It's certainly something that any game group can come to a conclusion on and kind of help them get to that level, but something like that would be kind of nice. But to be honest, if the group all starts at the same time in the same place and then just kind of builds games over time, I don't see a ton of ways to have a true runaway victor because, again, everyone's, quest and their progress is beholden only to them. Like, we're not competing for campaign points to see if one side wins. There's no runaway victor in that sense. And just to reiterate one more time, they've said numerous times in this section in the side margins, there will be supplemental material, both in specific battle tomes for your faction, as well as, I'm sure, separate supplements that they do like for 40k. If I'm honest, it's not perfect, but it is amazing. And by that I mean, what we actually have in this specific core book is fairly limited in terms of the kinds of artifacts that you can have, in your battle tome. The number of quests, there's only 8 of them. I could absolutely see if you get this in your hands and you're just like hyper focused on Path to Glory for the next, 6 weeks, something like that, you could kind of reach a point where it's a little bit bland, but that's where all these supplemental things are going to be necessary. Because yes, while this isn't like the end-all be-all for campaign construction, it is a great base that everything else can build upon. Like, honestly, all you need is like new quests and missions and veteran abilities that are more relevant to maybe your specific faction, and it takes on a whole new life and flavor of its own. And as I said before, I'm going to do a video actually walking through how to set up your order of battle and stuff. But honestly, in terms of like reviewing the system as a whole, this is a way to start with a warlord with a small area of the realms that you can craft your own narrative for under his control, or her control of course, and then expand outward, complete quests and attain mighty things, build renown, expand your territory. Like, all these things are happening thematically. And in that way, you can then demonstrate who is the best warlord amongst your group. You could even, if you wanted to have someone be a winner, the first person to get, you know, the mighty stronghold is the winner. But to be honest, I'm just someone who likes to have an ongoing story. It's up to you, and there's a lot of game here and a lot of ways to play with a lot more stuff on the horizon. So I like it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If there's any sections of the book that you want a little more clarification on, I'm more than happy to do a video kind of covering those. And there's going to be a regular series covering a Path to Glory army that I'm going to be doing with the Knights Excelsior. So if you don't want to miss that, go ahead, click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.